Welcome to Wax On, Wax Off, the podcast where a teenager gains wisdom and insight from pioneers and innovators that have come before in search of how to win in every facet of life and change the world. I'm your host, Solomon Cole, and let's get into today's episode. So for today's episode, it is episode 2 of Grasshopper Talk. It is also the season finale. I'm planning to start season 2 up in September. I will be letting you guys know specific dates on social media. But for today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing and talking to and really gleaning knowledge from a good friend of mine, Chrissa. Chrissa is amazing. She is super knowledgeable in a lot of things spiritual and a lot of things personal success. She has really done a whole 180 flip on what she believes, who she is, and really her personal health. And I'm really excited to hear all about this. Thank you so much for giving all the support that you have. If you wouldn't mind, it means a lot if you share, because I really want to spread this podcast and this knowledge and this wisdom with as many people as possible. And it would mean a lot if you could do that. So please share on social media. Send it to your friends on text messages. Send it to your parents, your siblings, whoever. It would mean a lot. Thank you so much, and let's get into today's episode. Chrissa, number 1, I want to say thank you for being on the podcast. And number 2, I wanted to kind of start this off by kind of asking getting you to tell the people a little bit about yourself. What are your main passions?
Okay. So I consider myself a very passionate person. Mm-hmm. I love a lot of things. One of the biggest things, I'm a nerd. Mm-hmm. I love learning. Mm-hmm. I just love exploring things that most people don't look at, mm-hmm. and thinking deeper about them, because I love that feeling whenever it clicks. Mm-hmm. That feeling is the best feeling in the world. Mm-hmm. I love poetry. Mm-hmm. I love reading and writing it. Mm-hmm. Slam poetry. I love just reading in general.
What that shirt you wore, it was sexy people read?
Yeah, sexy people read. It's from a reading competition. Yeah. Whenever I say I'm a nerd, I'm a nerd.
Reading competition. It's fine.
We got first place too.
There you go.
Yeah, what can I say?
You a speed reader or what? No, so you just read out loud, vocally, or what's the competition?
Yeah, they just write you. No, they give you a list of 30 books, and then we split it up with a team, and then we answer questions based off of it. Oh, so it's retention. Got it. Yeah, it's a test out loud.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I do that for fun.
I'd be terrible at that. My reading retention is I have to read a book multiple times to get it down.
I'm not that great at it either. I wasn't a huge contribution, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, but you got first place, so. You have done some deep exploration into who you are. What have you found?
What have I found? I found myself. Mm-hmm. I kind of have gone through a lot of different stages in my life, and I'm 18 years old. I know that I have so much more to experience, mm-hmm. But I kind of went from just being terrified of the world. I went from not knowing who the heck I was, and then I went to actually having a really good relationship with myself. Mm-hmm. And I kind of learned how to be my own best friend. Mm-hmm. And that makes all the difference in the world. Because mm-hmm. you learn that in the realization that you are stuck with yourself for the rest of this life, mm-hmm. that you're stuck spending it in your own head, you have to decide what you do with that. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of decided that I was really tired of just accepting that I had to bear with myself. Mm-hmm. And I learned how to appreciate myself, mm-hmm. and appreciate this life, and be thankful and show gratitude for everything, you
mm-hmm.
know?
How did you do that? How did you become friends with yourself? Because for me, I kind of will, it's I saw this meme. It was like, I didn't know, I thought I loved music. Turns out I just hated myself. Like you just don't want to be around yourself so you listen to music, or you listen to podcasts, or you watch TV, or you play video games, or you do whatever, to escape yourself. How did you, instead of escaping yourself, how did you become friends with yourself?
I would say the biggest thing is forgiveness. Like, I used to, if I made one mistake, if I was in one interaction, I said something that was like weird or awkward, which I still do that all the time to this day. You know that. I would beat myself up over it so much. And I would just tear myself down for it. And I realized that was doing nothing for me. It really wasn't. And that was all that was doing, is making me not be able to trust myself. And then I would do more weird and awkward things all the time. So just learning how to forgive yourself. Learning how to, whenever you do something that makes you proud, just be able to be proud.
Yeah, like appreciate yourself.
Yeah, appreciate yourself. And the other thing is eliminate all those things in your head that just want to tear yourself down. Like all those, I try really hard not to speak negatively to myself. And you have to force yourself to talk to yourself like a friend. Like if something happens and I notice myself talking to myself in a certain way, I ask myself, would I talk to my best friend like this? You know?
Yeah, so kind of like viewing yourself as like two entities in a way, like your consciousness and then like, would you say your mind, or?
Actually, that's really interesting, because I'm very interested in inner dialogues. I was listening to a podcast about this recently, about how some people don't have inner monologues.
Yeah, that's me. Literally, it was funny. I was watching Big Bang Theory, and Big Bang Theory, like the two guys who like talk to each other and are like constantly like arguing and debating and being like, no, you're wrong about this random superhero thing. That's what goes on in my brain. I have like the two guys going on constantly commenting in my mind. Like it's my whole life. It's like I have like two people who like kind of like each other but kind of don't like each other in my head.
I learn, and I actually went through this phase because for AP research we had to do a research study and we decide what we do. And one of the things that I was considering doing was just looking at people, how the structure of people's minds are, like how they structure their inner dialogues. And I learned that people's aren't the same. Like people's are really different. And so I realized that I'm almost always talking to somebody else in my head. Like I will analyze my thoughts by analyzing it with somebody else, whether that's a friend, whether that's like some stranger I create. I've had so many conversations like going on to this podcast, just analyzing things, you know?
Totally.
And like what you say, where it's, are both the people you? Or are they just like random people?
It's two people that are me. Well, it's like this like version of me that I don't like, and then myself.
Yeah, so it's like the devil and angel.
Yeah. It's like just me and the devil, but not
That's
actually the devil. It's just like this like kind of like annoying thing that keeps existing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also have a friend, and she told me that she realized that she doesn't like being a leader. Like she doesn't like taking charge, so that whenever she has to be in a position where she tells people what to do or to lead, she visualizes herself telling herself what to do. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, and I have another friend who said that he just like, he doesn't speak in English in his mind. Like it is in a different language. It's just he doesn't speak words, but it's like just some other language he created.
That's weird. So like the inner dialogue is like pretty interesting. There's a book that you should read. It's called The Power of Now. It's by Eckhart Tolle, and he talks about like the inner dialogue and how you are not your mind, and like it's like you and then your mind, and your mind kind of wants to run things, and you have to keep constantly like separating yourself as like two entities. I just started the book like yesterday, but it's really, really good.
Okay.
You want to start a podcast on religion and why we exist. Why do you want to start this podcast?
So I'd be starting it with my best friend. Not myself, a different best friend.
Different best friend.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Her name is Charlotte Mankiewicz. I love her dearly. She's incredible. She's like myself, but in a different font. That's what I always call her.
Yeah.
We kind of went through this whole journey together of just realization and just of questioning, you know? I guess if I start at the beginning, I'll just explain how we went on it because I love this story. So we were both raised Catholic by our dads, and then our moms my mom's Christian. She's like non-denominational. Her mom's not religious at all. But we ended up going on this, it's called NCYC, so National Catholic Youth Conference. And it was actually, like, it was really cool. At this point, I think I was leaning more so on agnostic than anything else. But, so we went to NCYC, and we kind of both decided we're going to view this with as open of a mind as we possibly can. And so they had, like, where if you wanted to, you could go to confession, which I don't know how familiar people are with Catholic practices, but that's pretty much just, like, as it's called. You go and you confess your sins to a priest. And so we decided, we're like, you know what, we're going to go and do this. And we were in line, because there was a really big line. Everybody wanted to go to confession. And so we were talking, and we were just going over everything that we didn't understand, you know, everything that we wanted to know more of. And we were like, you know what, whenever we go in, we'll ask the priest about it. And we didn't really expect to have much result, but we went in, and I remember right before they separated us to go with our priest, she turned to me and she was like, you know what I've realized? And I was like, what? She's like, I don't understand what love is. Yeah. That'll come back. And so they separated us. We both went with our priest. And for both of us, it was just such an interesting experience, because we got a reaction, both of us, we never expected that we would. Because whenever you think of a Catholic priest, you don't really think about, okay, this, I don't know what everybody thinks about, but I don't necessarily think about open-mindedness, you know? But I talked to this guy about reincarnation. And he viewed it with an open mind. Like, I talked about him just with all my doubts, everything, all my questions, and he sat there. We were there for at least an hour. We were the last ones there. And then finally he's like, hey, like, I'm sorry, but, like, I can't keep you here all night. And he's like, if you want to reach out to me, if you want to email me, like, please do. And he was amazing. Like, he was incredible. He told me, actually, he had a near-death experience, which, if you're not familiar, is just whenever you die for a short period of time, or you're, like, pronounced dead, and then you come back to life. And he told me about how whenever he was younger, he was fully atheist. You know, he was raised Catholic, but he was atheist. He was a metalhead. He grew out his hair. He said he was a womanizer. Like, he was a drug addict. And he said that one day he OD'd and he died. And in that period of time, a Mother Mary came to him, Jesus came to him, and his guardian angel. And his guardian angel took him and showed him hell and told him, if you don't change your ways, this is where you're going. And then he said, like, he came back. And he said that he then spent 20 years after that trying to figure out where he landed on religion, because he did not want to be Catholic, because that was the way that he was raised. But he realized after seeing Mother Mary that ultimately he believed that Catholicism was the truth. And that was not a conversation I expected to have, but it was so interesting. And anyway, so then we get out of confession, and I see my friend's been waiting there for me for half an hour. I felt so bad. But I was like, I have to tell you everything about this. And she's like, no, I have to tell you everything about what I just experienced. And so we both had, it turns out, these incredible experiences. She said that she went in, and the first question she asked, she was like, who is God? And the first thing that the priest that she was with said was, God is love. And that was just so, like, it felt, we call them parallels whenever something happens, and then something, it just feels full circle. And, like, she walked out and she told me, I don't understand what love is. And then she comes to find out
that God is love. That's really awesome.
And they had, like, a super interesting conversation too. Like, the priest was like, you know what? I don't like they were talking about God's pronouns. He was like, I don't like God is like is God. Like he doesn't have to necessarily have to be a guy. Like
he's a supernatural being. That's
yeah. And it was just so interesting. And then come to find out, the group that we were with had left and gone to the hotel, and we were left in this huge stadium alone in an unfamiliar city. And we were just like, we just broke out laughing whenever they left, because we were like, what the heck? How did they leave 2 teenage girls alone in this unfamiliar city? And we called them, and we were like, and nobody was concerned. That was the thing too, that nobody was concerned.
Yeah.
And we were like, hey, where are you guys? And they were like, oh, we're at the hotel. And I was like,
cool.
Well, we're not.
Yeah.
So, and the small group leader was just like, well, do you know the way back? And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, well, come back. And so we had to walk alone in this unfamiliar city, these 2 teenage girls. We were going like past bars. Some guy came up to us and was like, do you guys need help? And I'm pretty sure he was high. He smelled like weed. But anyway, we were like, yeah.
Yeah.
And we were just like talking to the homeless people. Like we could have died.
How long did you walk?
Probably, we got lost too. So probably about like an hour.
Well, great job, NCYC.
Yeah. And it was really cool because we talked to the guy that walked us home. He was telling us about his son. We literally stood outside of the hotel for another like 20 minutes just talking to this guy.
Yeah.
But it was just such a wild, cool experience. And so anyway, I know this is a long rant, but we kind of, after that, decided like, I want to know more. Like no matter what, I want to know more. And so after that, we just kind of went full throttle. We started looking at different religions, different denominations, because we realized ultimately if we're going to believe something, we have to understand all the possibilities. And so we've met with like a rabbi. We're now like really good friends. But we've gone to their house for dinner. Like this pastor and his wife have just taken us under their wing. They're incredible.
And they are Christian?
They're Christian, yeah. Okay. They're Presbyterian, so like Calvinist. Yeah. And so we talked to them about like predestination. We've gone to like a Hindu temple. We've looked into Zoroastrianism.
What is that?
It's very old religion. It's Iranian. Yeah. My bad. There you go. And it actually has a lot of parallels to Christianity. They believe that Christianity has taken some of its beliefs from Zoroastrianism. It's basically follows, and I can't pronounce all the deities' names, but
it's polytheistic?
Well, it's like there's a good God. I'm still confused on that because it says that it's monotheistic, but there's like 2 gods, but I think the one's like not quite a god. It's like the good and evil. It's like the battle between good and evil. It's like so I think God, it's like God and Satan, yeah. And it says like ultimately one day God will come back and will like melt all the gold and like save all the people. Yeah. And there's like a hell. It's not called that, and he said that everybody in hell will then eventually rise up and go to like the heaven place.
That's interesting.
Or I think they come back to earth. Yeah. I don't know, it's been a while. But it does have a lot of parallels to Christianity. But it's been incredible. It's been so cool. And we've just been exploring just life after death, the near-death experiences, reincarnation.
What have been like either the biggest parallels of examining other religions, or like what has been like the most impactful thing you have learned, like talking to these people from, or these like, I guess, religious leaders from different religions?
I think the most impactful thing has just been the amount of faith I've seen. Like that's one thing that I really, really struggled to understand in the beginning, because I'm such a skeptical person that I need to understand everything. Like I never believed that I could believe anything without knowing 100% that it was true, because I always have an inkling of doubt, and that's what I focus on. And so just seeing somebody who can devote their entire life to something without knowing 100% that it's true.
Yeah.
That has been so impactful to me. And then the biggest parallels I've seen. It's been interesting because one thing is that like celibacy is almost always a parallel amongst religions. And I think that that's very interesting. There's always, of course, been that element of faith. What else? There's usually some kind of prophet.
Is there always a loving God?
From what I've seen, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because it's like, I don't know, I think some people, like, who have either been burned by whatever religion it was, they've been burned by it, specifically Christianity, to be honest, or Catholicism. They've been burned by whatever, like, they condemned me, or they kind of stepped out of line, the religious people stepped out of line and took liberties that they shouldn't have. And I see a lot of these people that view God as this bad person, and the only reason why is God is tainted in their minds because of like the disciples of the God, or the followers of that God. And I heard Gandhi said a quote. It was like, I love your Christ, but not your Christian, or love your Christ, but don't like your Christians, whatever. Because of the execution of the good things that God had told them, what was like, it didn't meet up, it wasn't on par. And I think that a lot of people live their lives like burned or hurt by the church, but not by actually the God, and they kind of just like write it all off, and they're like, nope, can't be right, wrong, bad, I don't want to deal with that. And then they're either agnostic or they're atheist, and they kind of go the other way due to the hurt that was inflicted upon them.
Yeah, and I think that having a loving God, I think ultimately we all want to believe that there's good. Like that's what we want to believe in, because we see all this, there's goodness in the world, but there's also a lot of evil and a lot of hate. And so I think that we all want to believe that in the big picture, it's all for the greater good, you know, that it's all supposed to fit together to create something good.
And I think we also all desire for something bigger than us, something that is outside of us, that we, like, that's just bigger than us, so we don't have to be the center of our lives, like something that can be outside of us. Whether that's like loving people, good deeds, caring for the poor, or that's like, I believe in God, I love God, I want to make myself as close to God or Jesus or whatever as much as I possibly can. And I think that's why, like, if you look at, like, there's like Muhammad, or there's Buddha, or there's Jesus, and it's more like, I don't want to say attainable, but it's more like a human.
It's more relatable.
Yeah, it's like it's like a human form, and then there's also God as well. And I think that's super interesting. You've done a lot of research on life after death.
Yes.
Talk to me about your findings and all of that.
Okay, so even before we started this podcast, I was already talking about, like, before we turned on the cameras, I was already talking about this. One thing that I've been super interested in is the Division of Perceptual Studies at UVA. This is basically just a research program that studies consciousness and whether consciousness, what is that, and also does it exist after we die. And this is something that I would love to work with this program. I'm going into neuroscience. I'm going to college for the first time in the fall, and that's what I'm going to be majoring in. So this is something that I really want to understand at some point, which I don't know if we'll ever have the answers, but I want to understand it.
Also, I think there's, sorry to cut you off.
No.
I think there is something that humans don't want to do that we have to do, is you can't understand everything. So, like, even if you do all this research and stuff, and you try and understand as much as you can, you still have no answers. Like, I feel like humans always want to understand what's going on, and I think the most peaceful people are people who are like, I don't understand it all, I'm okay with that. I don't need to rationalize it, I don't need to put everything into my understanding. I don't hate it, I don't love it, I'm just going to be okay that it exists, and I don't understand why or how.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the hardest conclusions I had to reach, that I won't understand everything. And that is my biggest hope, is that after we die, we will be able to know everything. That is all I want, is to just see the big picture, and see what it's all for.
Totally.
But anyway, back on track to life after death. So the division of perceptual studies, the two things that I'm the most interested in is exploring near-death experiences and then past life memories, specifically around children. I've corresponded with the director of the division, Jim Tucker. He typically explores the past life memories. And then I personally met and kind of interviewed Kim Pemberthley, who is one of the newest members of DOPS, is what it's known for short. And so with the near-death experiences, they typically identify after. They don't know why people have these experiences, because it isn't everybody. Like, there will be people who will have a heart attack and they'll die for a little bit and come back and they won't experience anything. But then there will be people that just go this whole new place and they don't know why. And there's a lot of parallels amongst them, amongst different people's experiences. Typically you see traditionally traveling into some kind of light. They usually feel emotions of lovingness coming from it, and immediately after once they get into this space, they just feel at peace. They say there's a weight lifted, and so many people say that they did not want to come back. It's called the inner setting, I think that's what they changed the name to, where once they travel into the light, they come to this new location, and I think that's where the feelings of peace and welcomeness come in. And then there's also, they're a lot less common, but there's the darker NDEs, where people will have the traditional hellish images where there's imps pinching them. There was a professor who said that there was a bunch of these creatures that came up and just started pinching him and tearing his skin off, which is interesting. Yeah. And then there's also another one, is just nothingness. This lady said that there were she was surrounded by darkness, and then there were these figures that appeared, and they started taunting her, and she was like, please let me go back. And they're like, go back where? And she was like, and this is terrifying, and she was like, go back to life, go back to my family. And they're like, there never was any. They're like, that was all a joke. It never actually existed. You've been here the whole time. There's nothing beyond this.
It's like the Matrix.
Yeah. That scares me.
Yeah. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. And then with past life memories, I'm pretty sure a lot of people, these have been circulating around, you said that you watch a documentary about it. I'm sure it's all over TikTok. But there's a lot of stories where kids will have memories from past lives, essentially. And they're typically more common in Asian cultures, where in India, where reincarnation is much more accepted. But there are hundreds of cases in America. And they believe that that's just because it's much more reported, where it's more accepted. And so the most important cases are where a kid has these memories, and then they confirm that the person that they're saying that they were existed, and that there's a ton of parallels between what they're saying in that other person's lives. So one of the most common examples, and I think a lot of people have heard about this one, it was, I'm trying to remember his name, it was James Longo or something. It's not Longo, but it starts with an L. Anyway.
James L.
Yeah, James L. We're going to call him James L. But he was about, whenever he was a kid, he was always obsessed with airplanes. Yep. I'm saying you probably, yeah. And so he would always take his toy airplane, and he would ram it into the kitchen table, and there were just marks all over the table, and he'd say, airplane go down and fire, like little man going down or something like that. And whenever he got to be 3 years old, he'd start signing, he'd draw these horrific drawings of these plane crashes, and he'd sign them James 3. And he'd have these awful nightmares where he'd be kicking and screaming. Whenever his parents would talk to him about it, he would say that there was this plane crashing. And eventually he got to talking, and he said that in his past life, he had died in this plane crash. And he said that it was shot down by the Japanese. He told them the location that it happened. He said that his one friend was there. He called him by name. I don't remember the name right now. But so they reached out to Jim Tucker. And so Jim kind of, well, I probably shouldn't call him Jim. Mr. Tucker.
Jim.
We're not on a first name basis yet. Mr. Tucker did more research on it, and he reached out to the family. He found that this guy did exist. His name was James Houston, and he was actually James Jr., so he would be James II.
Whoa, so he went James 3 because it was, wow,
Yeah.
that's kind of deep.
Yeah. And they found out that his plane, and little James L, also identified the plane that James Houston, one of the ones that he owned.
Wait,
it wasn't the one.
James? Whoa.
Yeah, yeah.
So they named him the name of the guy. That's weird. That
is weird. And so he identified one of the planes that he flew once, but it wasn't the plane that got shot down in. But he was shot down by the Japanese. He was shot down in the location that James L said that he was. And the friend that he said was with him was flying the plane next to him. And James Houston was the only plane that got shot down at that time. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
And then there's other stories, one of which was this kid told his parents, he was like, I remember whenever I picked you. I think this is so interesting. He was like, I remember whenever I picked you. And they were like, what do you mean? And he was like, I saw you guys, you were at the beach. He like gave the location. It was like they were in Hawaii or something like that. And he said, like, I saw you guys and I said, I want them to be my mom and dad. And they realized that it was whenever they were there, that's whenever he was conceived. Like that's whenever they had him. They were on their honeymoon at that point, and he had no idea. He described exactly what they were doing, exactly where they were, what they were wearing. Yeah. Yeah,
that's pretty wild. And like the James kid too, didn't they ask him like all these questions about like, oh, like what's this airplane? But he like couldn't remember any of the newer planes because that was after he had died. But like if they showed him all the different ones, he was like, oh, and that's called the N765, and he like knew all of the names. Yeah, that was wild. I think the documentary is just called Life After Death. And it's like, it's really good.
I've heard of that. I think that's might be based off of one of the books that they've written. Yeah, but it's just one thing that Jim Tucker said that he does is he'll...
Mr. Tucker.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Tucker. I apologize. Hopefully he doesn't hear this. He'll be like, disrespectful, you can never work with me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he'll take these cards, and he originally started with you to have like what you were saying, where there'd be like a series of cards, like how they'd show him a bunch of different planes. And they'd have them like point out which one was from their past life. But they kind of realized that kids have short attention spans, and that's why this is so difficult to study, because you're studying kids, and kids are difficult to work with. But so he began showing them like two cards. And he showed, one was like the house of where the kid said that he lived. Well, like the life of the person they lived, it was their house.
Yes, Jim too, or not Jim, sorry, James too.
Yeah. And then he'd show like some other random house as a control, and he'd have them pick out like which one do you recognize. And I know for the one, he said that the house likely had changed since he last seen it, so he couldn't identify that one, but he could identify the neighbor's house, which I thought was interesting, I guess. But a lot of them like have very high success rates with that, you know? So yeah, they found also, a lot of times they'll have birthmarks from the way that they're supposedly died, You know, like in a lot of cases, they'll have an entrance and exit wound if they had said that they were shot. They had. And he believes that that isn't because it's just, I'm trying to understand what they were saying, but I think that it's essentially one of the examples that he had used was that which I think is very interesting, that apparently your mind can imprint things on your body.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a guy who had been like kidnapped and he had ropes tied around his wrist,
mm-hmm.
super tight. And whenever he was telling the story and he was remembering, the rope burns appeared back on his arm. Yeah. And so you can actually, like your brain can imprint things on your body.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other cases like that. So he believes that if this is true, because you can't prove any of this,
mm-hmm.
But it's that if you died in such a traumatic way and then you go into a different body, then essentially the memory of it and the severity of that memory will then imprint that on your body. Like there was this girl who said that she had been kidnapped by this guy and he had like chopped off her fingers. And she was born with like without fingers, you know. There was another guy, what was it? That like his finger got caught in a machine or something, he said. And and they verified that these people exist in their past lives. And yeah, he was born with his fingers deformed. Another guy was supposedly shot in his head, and he had like a stump for an ear.
Interesting. And in most cases, it's traumatic death, right? It's like not like, oh, I died in my sleep.
Yeah, that's the parallels that they've drawn. That typically and these are separate from each other. That either they died at a younger age, or they died in a very traumatic way. Which usually, if you're dying at a younger age, you're dying in a traumatic way. Yeah. But yeah, yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's something you should look into. I watched a couple documentaries on it, but it's like biblical parallels of aliens and like trying to like biblically rationalize aliens.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Comedy Central. Oh my gosh, the History Channel did like a couple different documentaries about it, and it was pretty fascinating.
That is fascinating.
This is kind of a hard thing to like
transition
into. But what have been like, talking more, I guess, about you and your goals and your whatever, the stuff you've gone through, what have been your biggest victories in your life?
My biggest victories? I would say I've realized that I've become the person that I wanted to be. Like my freshman year self, I've kind of accomplished and became the person that I wanted to be by the time I graduated. And that makes me very proud, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I should have talked about before with building a relationship with yourself, is I write letters to myself all the time. We had to do it for school. And so, but I still do that now, just because like I wrote one, so whenever I graduate from college, I'll be getting an email from myself.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I scheduled it. And I highly recommend doing that. But whenever I was a freshman, they had us write a letter and we'd get it whenever we graduate. So I just got it this year. And it was really depressing, it was. But I loved reading it because it just showed me how far I'd come. And everything that I said in it, like, I hope that you do this. Like, I hope that you've accomplished this. I hope that you still have this person in your life. I did all of that. So that was a really big accomplishment for me. Beyond that, I would say, well, one thing, I mean, I started a gardening club at my school without knowing anything about gardening. I just wanted to have a garden really bad. And I ended up, in the beginning of the year, because I started it with one of my friends, we said, by the time we graduate, we want to have a greenhouse. You know, we want to have a greenhouse for the school. And I was like, that's a bit ambitious, but because I was like, how are we going to finance that? but we ended up getting a $10,000 grant so that we can get a greenhouse. And we bought it before I graduated, so I'm counting it towards my goal because there are no unrealistic goals, they're just unrealistic timelines. And I just drove past and they started constructing it. And so
that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What have been your biggest struggles?
I have to figure out how dark this should get.
We could go as dark as you want.
Well, it's your podcast. Okay, so whenever I say I've come a long way, I mean it. I really do. And at my worst, if I start there, I was like, I don't like to give numbers, but I was like hardly eating anything at all. I had debilitating anxiety. Like I struggled to get out of bed every single morning, and I was just incredibly depressed. And I don't say that lightly. And I just, like, every single day was a struggle. And that was hard because it was an internal struggle. Like, yes, there were several external factors that contributed to that, but I just, like, nobody knew. That was the hardest part, that nobody knew.
Yeah.
Not my parents, not my siblings, not my friends, which I didn't really feel like I had any friends, but I think, and I don't blame any of them for that by any means. I was very good at hiding it. And I think a lot of people in this generation have experienced things like that. And I would never wish that upon anybody. But and so I would say that's probably been my biggest struggle. Just kind of being at that point in your life where it's just like you don't want to live, you know, like you don't want to get out of bed every morning. And then
was it, and you can be like, I don't want to answer this question.
Okay.
Was it suicidal, or was it more like I'd be happy if I don't wake up today? Because I've heard people say, no, I wanted to kill myself, and I was like planning it. And then I've heard other people say, like, no, I never did any planning. I just kind of didn't want to exist. I just wish that I could just kind of like, if I didn't wake up the next morning, I'd be happy. Like that would be the goal.
It depended on the day, but both, I would say. Like, there were days that were worse than others. I honestly, I kind of accepted that eventually, see, this is going to get really dark, but I kind of accepted that eventually I would, you know, like I would end it. And just whenever you're in the mindset, like I just thought that was how the world worked, you know, like anytime that my family, and I think that was also the anxiety combined, but like anytime that my family member would leave that was just upset, I would say, like, I would think, like, what if this is the last time I ever see them, you know? And it just, I've never been like a hateful or a well, no, I can't say I've never been, but it blows me away that I could have that kind of relationship with myself looking back now, you know?
Yeah.
Or that I could think like that looking back now. But yeah, whenever you're there, that's just how you view the world, you know? It's a totally different way of looking at life.
How did you go from that, like, rock bottom, super low experience to now being where you are and being this, like, happy, I would say, outgoing, kind, like, not the complete opposite of what you just said? I mean, I know there's stuff always that goes on in the head that people, that you don't tell other people, or that people don't know what it's like. But at least on the outside, it looks like you have, like, kind of really just gone to the complete other end of that. How did you get there?
I got help. That was the main thing, because as I said, nobody knew. Like, I didn't tell anybody. I was so committed to not telling anybody. And that was for a lot of reasons. Like just as an example of just how committed I was. And I've never really told anybody this, but as I said, like I was not eating and I didn't want anybody to know. So, and the doctors were suspecting it. And so they made me go to a nutritionist, and I literally took rocks about the size of my fist and I put them, I wore baggy pants, I put them in my pocket. I had about 6 in there, like the size of a fist. I don't know how I hid this. My mom was like, we're going shopping first, we're going to the mall. So I had to carry them around the whole time, but I was so committed. And so that I would be like a normal weight, you know. I was still underweight even with 6 rocks in my pocket.
Wow.
Yeah, but eventually I realized, like, why am I doing this? You know, why am I living like this? Because I realized if I accept this as my fate, it is my fate, you know? And the moment that I finally snapped and I was like, I have to do something about this is, oddly enough, well, for context, my sister was also going through, it was different, but like she was also going through a little bit of a rough time. And I told myself, because I'm 1 of 5, but I told myself, I was like, I have to wait until she graduates before I say anything, because like I know that I need a lot of help, like, and I can't have that if she needs it. Like that's how I thought of it, is that if I ask for help, all the attention will be on me and she needs it right now. And I don't remember why she said this or or how in the world it came up, but she was like something about how, like, she was like, you always have to have the attention on you. She's like, the attention is always on you. And at that time, like, that struck me so hard, because I was like, I have done so much so that wasn't the case. Like, I've done so much, because I was, like, I had, like, it wasn't like I was an extroverted person then too. Like, I don't know where that came from, because I felt like I was always the one in the shadows, not in the net. Like, I chose to be in that place. I put myself in that place, but I didn't know where it came from. But in that moment, I realized, like, no matter what I do, no matter how many times I put myself back there, like, it's not, everybody has their own issues. And if I have gone through not asking for help so that I'm not taking any of that from her, it doesn't matter what I do, because if I'm being told now that, like, I'm already getting how do I phrase this? I think I just realized that in that moment that I might not be the problem, you know? Yeah. That everybody has their own issues, and maybe I'm not the one causing all of them. And so my mom wasn't there that day, but I texted her and I was like, I need to talk to you whenever you get back. And she came back, and immediately I just broke down in tears. And I just kind of told her what was going on. And I went to therapy for a time. And it actually goes full circle, because on Thursday, I'm meeting with the same therapist that I talked to then. And I'm kind of just doing that because I'm like, I'm going to college. I kind of just want to tell her how far I've gone. But I think that the act of asking for help made all the difference, because whenever you have all of that in your head, that's where it stays. Yeah. You know, I had no outside party telling me that this isn't how the world works. And I made an active change. Like, I made an active choice that I need to change. And it was a struggle, but it was like I got a second chance at life. You know, and that's whenever my life started.
Yeah. That's really amazing. And I like that you talked about therapy, because I think therapy is super important. I think having that outside party who's like, hey, you're kind of either they're going to be like, this is serious, let's get you help, or they're going to be like, you're kind of making things bigger than they are. And because everything is in your head, that's the only scale you have. But when someone else is like, not in like a, oh, suck it up, no emotion kind of deal, but like kind of being like, no, this is a little bit too dramatic, or this is like, it's not as big as you think it is, you're going to be okay. That's huge, and it's important to have that. And I've talked about having a mentor, having a life coach. Like I literally had my life coach on the podcast. Like that was,
I know, I love that episode.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for people to have outside forces and not be isolated to this, not be isolated to your phone, and that's the only thing that's getting you out of your mind or outside of yourself.
And what I will add with that is that if you do go to therapy, know that it isn't you go to one if it doesn't work out. I think that that's very common that people will do that, because I mean, I probably shouldn't talk, because what happened is I liked the first lady, but then she ended up leaving that practice, and then I got some other guy, and he was like fine, he was nice, but I would go on rants, because this was over COVID, so it was over Zoom. And I'm pretty sure he was just on his phone while I was talking. Like, I remember I went on some rant about like my religious journey, and I was like, what if? Yep. I was like, what if? I remember I said, what if Muhammad just had schizophrenia? And he just looked up and he was like, what? And yeah. So then I kind of just like, this isn't working out. And then but I think that at that point I had gone far enough and I had people in my life that I could talk to. You know, I have a very strong support system, and that's something that's been super important to me. Developing a strong support system, talking to people. Like I know so many people who are scared of being a burden. Holding all of that inside, it's people see it. Like I know people that I can tell that they are holding so much in them, and I want them to let it out. Like I want them to so bad, but that has to be your own personal choice. Yeah, you kind of have to like, it's hard because I have so many people in my life that'll come to me for advice. I've talked about it before. They'll be like, I need help. Should I, whatever, should I date this girl? And I'll be like, well, where she's at and where you're at, probably not. And they'll be like, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. I did that with Brandon, who's like my mentor. And he was like, okay, that's fine that you're going to do that. I still love and support you. I love you. I don't love your actions. Like that's his philosophy. And I think that that's like a great way to look at all of that. Is like, I'm here to help pretty much anyone. Like if you text me, DM me, email me, I will try and help you if I can. And I will love you as much as I possibly can, but I'm not going to love the decisions you make. I'm not going to support all of the actions you make. And I think having those people is huge. And also talking about the therapist, I heard someone use the analogy of like having a therapist is like going to a restaurant and getting food. It's like, oh, I went to a bad restaurant and never eating again. Like, it doesn't make sense. That's stupid. No, you just find the food or the restaurant or the cook or the chef, whatever that you like, and you figure out like what you like and what you need. Because like I don't like Indian food, so I'm not gonna go. Love Indian. I'm gonna get. I'm sorry, I had to. That's my favorite food. Yeah, sorry. I had some today. I'm not gonna go to an Indian place and not like the food, and then I'm gonna be like, okay, well I'm not eating again and just die of starvation. Like that's not gonna happen. But I'm gonna go figure out what suits my needs and what I need. Yeah, I kind of just went more for fun because as I said, I'm going to neuroscience, but I'm going with a concentration of psych. And so I was like, I found this neuropsychologist, and I was like, I booked an appointment, but I was like, I kind of just want to like, I just wanted to see more so of how she differed from other psychologists and stuff. And I went, okay, listen, I do not like throwing accusations around, but like, I'm pretty darn sure this lady was very racist. Like, specifically against Asians, which was, it was like an acid trip going to that session. She talked way more than I did. She told me that all my teachers were the majority of my teachers were probably alcoholics. What in the world? Yeah. She told me that like Asians work together to bring down the academic system so that they can be on top, and they will tear anybody down. she told me about how like men with Asperger's are violent, like the most violent people. She told me about how at my school, which this isn't okay. She told me that at my school, one of her patients was a security guard that goes to our school. And she said that he came to her and he was like, I noticed this teacher leaving every day for like during study hall. And he was like, should I follow him? And she was like, yeah, follow him.
Are you sure your therapist
encouraged this man to follow one of our teachers, and he followed him to a bar.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, anyway, it was really weird. But yeah.
Are you sure your therapist wasn't like Alex Jones? That's wild.
Yeah, it was.
On that note, I'm going to take a quick pee break, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. Bathroom break complete. You were just talking to me about getting out of your comfort zone and how you did the speech.
Oh yeah, I just gave a speech in one of my classes about stepping outside your comfort zone.
Yeah. I guess kind of talking about stepping outside of your comfort zone. What is your opinion on dating? You have a boyfriend. He's my friend. He's awesome. So like, what is your opinion on dating, and like more specifically, like teen dating? Do you think it should happen? What parameters do you think there should be? Like what I guess I should ask you, what did you want for yourself for teen dating?
What do I want for myself? Somebody who adds something to my life. Somebody who makes me a better person. I think in the long term, so somebody I could see myself marrying.
Did you always date for like in looking at it like, could I marry this person, or were you just like, this would be a fun whatever?
Well, Nick's the only person I've ever dated.
One time gang.
Which actually, usually I would, but in his case, no. Because I was so intent on not dating anybody going into college. I always had in my head, I don't want that. Because I wanted to go far away. That was always my dream. But I wanted to go to North Carolina, but I ended up in Ohio, which I think is pretty sad, but
I love Ohio. What are you talking about? Cleveland's the best city out there.
Yeah, well, I'm in Worcester, so
I don't even know where that is.
Yeah, most people don't.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I wanted to be able to go far away without feeling guilty about it. Which I didn't go close because of him. I went close because they have a really good neuroscience program. And because I realized that the warmth does not outweigh the relationships I've made. And my best friend is actually going to school with me.
There you go.
I know.
Roommates?
No, we don't get to pick our roommates. I know.
That's sad.
It's like the only school that you don't get to.
That sucks.
Yeah. But anyway, so I was very intent on that. But I quickly realized that I cannot date with a deadline. Because what's the point?
Yeah.
Why would I date somebody if I just know that it's going to end in the next year? And so I realized that like, if the person's worth it, then, because we'll only be like 3 hours away. Yeah. Which we'll be able to see each other on breaks. But if the person's worth it, then it's worth it, So yeah, I guess initially going to the relationship, I wasn't necessarily thinking about it like that, but also Nick and my origin story is interesting. So originally I went on the date. I'll just give context of how we started dating. So basically what happened is which we kind of met by coincidence. We've been going to school together. We're in the same grade. We go to the same school since middle school. But I didn't know his name and he didn't know mine. And so he was working at Dairy Queen at the time, and it was my friend's birthday, and we were supposed to be going to Griff's, which is a different ice cream place, but my friend was driving me with her now ex-boyfriend. But they somehow she accidentally drove to Dairy Queen instead of the ice cream place that we were supposed to be going to, and Nick was working there. And I walked in, and my friend's ex-boyfriend was friends with him, and so they were talking, and afterwards I told him, I was like, oh, he's kind of cute, and he was like, do you want me to set you up? And I was like, I don't know anything about him. And he was like, he just told me a bunch of bad things about him. He was like, oh yeah, he was in my chem class, like he did not do well. I don't want to expose him with everything that he said, but I was like, okay, so no, I'm not interested. And he's like, oh, I already texted him. And I was like,
dang.
Yeah. And so I was like, I can't back out. And so Nick was like, oh, I'll go. But then I'll just call her ex-boyfriend, I won't say his name, we'll call him L. Okay, we'll call him L. Actually, that's what his name starts with.
I know.
Oh.
I know who he is.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, you go to the same church, don't you?
No, but I know who he is. Anyway, on with the story.
Okay. Anyway, I thought that it was from the James L.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I know his first name. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. So he then told Nick a bunch of bad things about me, and which he said that I was weird and a nerd, but both of those things are true. So
this guy's terrible at setting people up.
No, because he set it up for his own amusement. He was fully prepared for it to crash and burn, and so was I. Because I was like, you know what? It'll be a nice story. Like, I'll go on this date. It'll be super awkward. Hopefully something funny will happen, and I can tell the story.
Yeah.
But we actually ended up hitting it off. And then oddly enough, we planned a second date, and oddly enough, we both ended up getting stitches and not being able to go on the date. Just by coincidence.
Oh, was that when he hit his head? That's crazy.
Yeah, in soccer, he had to get stitches on the side of his head, and that's a long story, but basically my sister's autistic, and she did not get the concept that if my hand is in the door, you can't run through it. And so she ran into my arm, the door's broken. Basically, I had to get stitches across my knuckle, and she broke it too.
Nice.
Yeah. And so he was like, I can't go, I'm sorry, I have to get stitches. And I was like, okay, if you don't want to go, just tell me. You can cancel. You don't have to come up with some story. And they sent me a picture, and he was covered in blood. And then 2 hours later, I ended up having to go get stitches, which is really weird.
That's really weird.
Yeah. And then I was like, it's a sign.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so in the beginning, I did not think that it was going to work, because him and I are complete opposites. Like the only thing that we have in common is both of our dogs have the same name. That's it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah. You guys are literally complete opposites. Like, you're a nerd a little bit. I'm a nerd too, so I can call it out. And he's like a jock. It's like the complete, like,
I said all I have to do is get him to join the musical, and then we're all the cliches.
Yeah. Oh, literally. That's so funny. Yeah, that's
he's
crazy.
A total introvert. I'm an extrovert. Yeah.
It was funny because he is an introvert, but I saw him around people. Like, I brought him to a UFC fight, and he was like, I was like, okay, this is gonna be a little awkward. He walks in, he's like, "What's up, bros?" Sits on the couch and just starts broing it up with my uncles, and I'm like, okay, like, this is not how I thought it was gonna go. It was pretty funny. Yeah,
he's fine whenever he's there, but I had to actually convince him to go to that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did, because we had been. He's like, I've done too much socializing today.
Yeah.
Because he went over was talking to his neighbor in the morning, and then we went on a walk, and then we talked to his other neighbor for like an hour, and he's like, oh, and then he went to my house and we played spike ball, so he's talking to my parents, and he's like, oh, I've talked to too many people today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got him out of his comfort zone,
I
just
did.
like we were talking about. There you go.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, I did not expect that to last long, and not nearly as long as it did, and oh, look at us now.
Yep.
But, yeah.
You being a part of Gen Z could be the best or the worst generation. I hope that I can make it the best generation. Not single-handedly. We all need to pitch in.
I got you.
Yep. What would you say are the strengths of our generation?
I think we have a whole lot of potential. Like we have all the potential at our fingertips. We have so many resources. Like this is, I mean, not that money is everything, but like this is probably the easiest generation there ever has been to make money. And I know that there's all like unemployment and everything, and then all with that, but like you could, it's so, I don't want to say it's easy, but like there's so much money to be made.
It seems more achievable due to not social media, due to like having a phone and the internet and stuff.
We have so many resources. Like we can help so many people with that. Like it's so much easier to organize things, like to organize groups, to start nonprofits. Like we have so much potential for change. We have so much potential to help this world. And yeah, and you see people are taking on airs of activism. You are, in some instances, like that can go good, that can go bad, but we can do so much with this generation if we all are able to work together. Like I truly believe that we can turn this world around.
I guess on the other side of that schism, I love using that word.
Schism.
What do you think are our weaknesses as a generation? Or like the biggest weakness, whatever.
Yeah. I think we've kind of created a generation of followers.
I agree completely. I feel like people will, it's like a religion. You have your information sources where you know it is the gospel truth and you take it for, you don't even think about it. You just take it, this is truth, I move on with it. And it's like cultic in a way. It's like you hear something from the people you believe always will tell the truth. And that used to be for in America, that used to be the American government, that used to be the American news outlets, because they used to tell you the truth and you knew it was the truth. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait, they're wrong sometimes. And it rocked people off of whatever they believe. So they were like, I don't know what to believe. And that's where these like, that's at least what I believe, where these like miniature groups of like, we all believe this thing, and we all believe this thing, and we all believe this thing. And there are like, there's like left, right, whatever you want to call it, like all these different like groups of people that are all believing the same thing, and all take the same information from the same outlets and only trust those outlets, and everything else is fake news.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I interrupted.
Go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's confirmation bias.
Yeah.
You know, because our algorithm caters everything for us. So all we see every day is people who agree with us. And if everybody agrees with us, then there has to be some truth in it.
Yeah, and then when you're getting everything you agree with, you're swiping, agree, and then you come across something that like makes you question it. You're like, I hate that. Well, let's cancel
they're ridiculous.
Yeah,
you know?
This is bad. Why would I ever have to think about something that I don't personally believe or that I don't like think is true? Hey, buddies that all believe the same thing as me, let's cancel them. Let's get them out of here, because we don't want to have to hear you anymore. And I think that's what's going on. And it's not like there's no tolerance for differences in that sense, in like beliefs. But whatever, like your gender and your race, like we have really grown in those areas. Like there have been a lot of growth in certain areas, but I think certain other areas have kind of been stunted, like due to that. You know what I mean?
I heard a quote recently, and I don't know if it's 100% true, and I don't want to. It's kind of falling into the thing of pitting everybody against each other, but I thought it was funny. It was like, let me think. It was like Democrats believe or find everybody, or Democrats love everybody who is different except for people with different opinions, and Republicans are okay with people with different opinions but not people who are different, or something like that.
That was
and
Bill
I
Maher,
know,
right?
I don't know.
I
I don't
think it was
remember.
Bill Maher.
I just thought that it was funny, and I didn't say it as well, and I'm not saying that that's true.
It was a generalization that like has some factual basis.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot, not just Republicans and Democrats. I think it goes across the board. And I think being able to accept other people and say, you're different, but I love you for that. You have opinions that challenge mine, and having a civil conversation about it and being like, okay, here's what you believe. Now here's what I believe. And you go back and forth and you figure out, okay.
Asking questions.
Yeah, because none of you are going to be 100% right. I 100% guarantee that none of you will be 100% right, and you can take stuff from the other person's opinions that are true and like kind of mix match it. And I think that that's like something that's kind of forgotten, and that needs to happen, and we need to be okay with accepting other people. We kind of already talked about this, but what do you think our generation needs to succeed and go in the right direction?
I think focus. I think that that's something that this generation really struggles with. I mean, just looking at how much ADHD has skyrocketed. And I'm not saying that ADHD is a problem. I'm actually on the track for getting checked out on that.
ADHD gang.
But I mean, focus in direction, you know? Like, I think people, it's so common nowadays that people just spend hours and hours and hours on their phone. And sometimes they'll be sitting somewhere and I'll just look around and everybody's on their phone. I mean, and I know there's a lot of benefits to your phone. There is. It's created for a reason. It's a tool. It's a resource. But it should not be your world. You know, like I saw this thing and it was like we used to go on our phones to escape the world, but now we go to the world to escape our phones.
Yeah, and that's not good.
That's not good. No, it's not. And I think that if we spend, like, we only have so many hours in a day, you know, and think about how far we could get if we didn't have all these distractions, if we were able to put these down, if we were able to decide what we want, and instead put our time and our energy and working towards that instead of scrolling.
100%. Yeah, like you talked about it. There's so much potential, but we squander the potential because of this, really.
It's mind-numbing. It really is, because I can tell, because every once in a while I'll fall into it and I can literally feel the switch in my brain. It feels like my brain's melting slightly. Like because if I'm spend too long on my phone, I can feel myself getting more and more lazy, and that carries throughout the rest of the day. It does. But then if I wake up in the morning and I do something productive and I stick with that throughout the day, I feel significantly better by the end of the day than if I was on my phone the whole time or just for several hours throughout that day. And so I think that being intuitive and just, I suggest, like, in the past week, my family went out to Texas and we stayed in my aunt's hunting cabin, and there was no Wi-Fi. And usually, like, whenever I get ready in the morning, I'll listen to like a podcast or something, but I don't have unlimited data or anything, so I couldn't watch any videos. I couldn't listen to anything, and I loved it. Like, I really did. I forgot how much I love thinking. Like, I really do. I will have conversations with myself all the time, and I miss that. Like, I really did. And I felt so much more productive, you know, and I felt so much better by the end of the day.
I remember one time, I don't know, I feel like I used to do this to myself, like, subconsciously. Like, I would get myself in trouble so that way I would lose my phone. But I lost my phone for a month. It was a month, just nothing. I was allowed to have my phone. What did you do? I was allowed to text people. No, it was awesome. It was the best I've ever felt. I was journaling every single day. I was meditating. I was working out. I was getting into fitness. I was reading books. I was, like, just happy. I couldn't even listen to music. The only music I heard was, like, on the radio or something. It was like I was transported back in time. And I was so much happier. But, like, I need this because I have to do a podcast, and I need this because I have to do X, Y, and Z, and I need this so I stay informed, and I need this so I make up all these excuses. And I wish we could do something like the whole world, like, goes offline for a month or like a week or whatever, and we kind of just all, like, Or like just like go back in time, like it's like a Ren fair, but for the whole world.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be incredible. That'd be so cool.
Yeah, I've had that idea a lot, but I don't know. I felt the best. Like that was like I would spend my whole life right in that corner of my room. I'd read books. I'd be journaling. I'd be doing all these things, just thinking about stuff and analyzing different things. And I remember when I got my phone back, it was like I was like so excited I got my phone back, but then I also was like I'm gonna lose all this, and I knew I was going to, and I was like, well, whatever. And now I'm back in this like vortex that is technology. Yeah, so definitely putting checks and balances and figuring out what those balances and how it works with your life, I think is super important. And if it makes you feel uncomfortable involving technology and putting boundaries up, then that's probably what you should do.
Yeah. Stepping outside your comfort zone. I mean, I think that, and we were talking about this right before we turned the camera on after the pee break. I just think one of the most important things that you can do is step outside of your comfort zone. Like get comfortable, and I know that that's so cheesy. I know it is, but get comfortable with that feeling of being uncomfortable. And I get it because I have anxiety. I mean, I still do, and I get all the physical symptoms of it. That's something that people don't talk about. Like I will be talking to people. And I consider myself like an extrovert. I like meeting new people. I love meeting new people. But I will be talking to new people, and verbally I'm fine. Like I told Saul, like I'm really nervous. Like I'm okay at this point, but like especially in the beginning, I was really nervous talking on this podcast. But I've learned how to keep my voice steady. Sometimes I physically shake. That's the one thing that I can't prevent being visually apparent. But I will be lightheaded. Like I was so lightheaded in the beginning. I was sweating. I'm shaky. I feel like I'm gonna throw up. Like if somebody just went into my body for a second, they'd be like, what the heck is wrong with her? Yeah. But I'm so used to it because I've been putting myself out there. I've learned to do things like one thing that my friend and I do. We go on, we call them kindness dates. And we will just like go, we'll write notes on people's car, put them on their car. One time we went into a grocery store and we just started handing people flowers. One thing that we did, this wasn't necessarily for the kindness day, we just did it for fun. We set up a table at Keystone Lake. It's a public lake near our house. And we set up a table, we set up a sign that said free advice and lemonade. We brought lemonade, and we just had strangers come up to us and ask us for advice. And we never asked permission if we could be there. We just sat up a table and we just talked to strangers. We said people could come up. We say, in order to get lemonade, either ask us for, like, tell us something, we'll give you advice, or tell us a story. And like that, I was nervous. Like that wasn't comfortable, but I did it anyway because it was a learning experience, because it was a new story. I love collecting stories. And just, if something makes you uncomfortable, I mean, depending on, some things make you uncomfortable for a reason. But if something's a new experience, weigh the pros and cons. That's what I do. I'm a big pros and cons person, and that makes a big difference. If you want to talk to somebody new, does talking to them, the best that could happen, does that outweigh the worst that could happen? And if so, go for it. Don't hold anything back. Yeah, that's something that, I mean, for those of you, if you're listening and you're like, I don't want to do that, I'm not going to do that, you're going to have to do it at some point. You're going to have to learn that lesson, or you're literally never going to do anything ever. Like you have to be a human and exist. You have to get out there and do something. Like if you do it sooner rather than later, it will benefit you so much. I'm being serious. You will be so far ahead of the curve. Like I mean, I have gotten money for college because I've learned how to talk to people. Like one thing is, I got an extra $9,000 for college because I was just persistent. You know, I would email people, and all the time, I feel bad for them. I would meet with them alone. That's one thing that they told me that I didn't realize wasn't normal, is they said that I was very independent compared to most people, because whenever I would go on and meet with these like financial people, like I would do it, like I would be the one talking to them, not my parents. And if you learn how to do that, if you learn how to self-advocate, self-advocacy is something that's very important and will benefit you throughout your life a lot. If you learn how to do that, learn how to do it now. Excuses are that's one thing that I should also add to one thing that I think could help our generation, is I think that with drive and with focus, if you're unfocused, it's usually because you're making excuses for yourself. Like what you were saying, that like, we need our phone for this, we need it for that. Like one thing that I am guilty of is like, if I'm like looking at a video or something, instead of doing something else, I'll be like, oh, I can, like, maybe I'll find something encouraging, or I'll find something that I can send to somebody to make their day. You know, like it's, one thing that I've learned to do is, if I want to do something, I'll do it later, is not a valid excuse.
Yeah, I think people want to rationalize their addiction, because I feel like the phone is the like most widely accepted drug. Like that's what it is it gives you a dopamine. It's
only other thing you call users.
Yeah, that's true. Wow, that's actually getting wild. I guess kind of wrapping up the podcast, because you kind of have to go to work soon. What is your biggest life advice right now? Because I've asked that question before and people are like, well, I don't know, it's just kind of where I'm at right now, and I'm going to continue to develop. So I'm asking it for right now, where you are in your personal development. What is your biggest life advice?
Well, usually I would say like, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, but I think that we covered that, and I'm going to utilize as much as I can. Can only be one thing? Or can it be
you could say multiple things.
Okay, because one thing that you gave me as a prompt that you might ask, with how to be like, break out of that shy shell. So I kind of came up with like a good procedure that I think helps me. So I offer that up.
Go for it.
Okay. So I think in order to, if you consider yourself a very shy person, you know, if you really struggle with talking to new people and getting out of that comfort zone whenever it comes to people, first and foremost, I'd say figure out the kind of person that you want to be. I said that before, and I think that that's very, very important. And I say visualize that. You know, like before I go into the new setting, I will picture the kind of person that I want to be. Like I will picture myself laughing. I will picture myself talking to people. I would visualize the smile and how like people might react to me, you know? So decide who you want to be. And then after that, pick out a nice outfit, you know? I would say find your style. And I think that that's something that people don't really, and maybe that doesn't work for everybody, but that works for me. Like me, whenever I go into something that I'm nervous about, you comment on my happy pants. I'm wearing my happy pants right now. They have smiley faces on them. And I'll wear them if I'm going into a setting that isn't necessarily like I'm worried about meeting people, because that's a great conversation starter. You know, I dress so that I'll look approachable. You know, I dress so that I feel comfortable and confident. So find something that you feel confident in. I think that that's very, very important. And I think that that can make a huge difference. At least it does for me. And that's not just for girls. Like one of the first things I noticed about Saul, and I think I told you, is that like you have great fashion sense. And you don't see that with guys a lot. So that makes a huge difference. Like, I feel like guys with fashion sense are very approachable. And so I would say that, find your fashion. Ask questions. That's one thing that made a huge difference for me. Like I mean, I probably went too far. I literally had a list of questions in my phone that whenever the moment, I was just known for this, like it was funny. Well, at least I thought it was, maybe it wasn't. But people would be like, Chris, are you gonna pull out your list again? And I'll be like, I mean, if you insist. And I just had a list of questions, and I never like small talk. And I found out that if you ask deeper questions, like people usually react better than you expect to that. And you can learn a lot about people.
Mhm.
Like I like learning about people, and it's very interesting to hear different answers. So have questions that you're going to ask.
Mhm.
And you'll learn people like talking about themselves. Like that's
Yeah.
one thing. And that's not I'm not saying that in a way that people are conceited. I'm saying that in the way that it's
People like people that are like themselves, or and they just like themselves because it makes them feel good. They're like, oh, there's something valuable about
and it's
me.
more comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't have to be worried that you're not going to find an answer if
Mhm.
it's you. Like if somebody's like, oh, what do you do for fun?
Mhm.
Like what? And so know what you're going to ask. Like have questions, and just ask them. Don't trail off at the end of your sentence.
Mhm.
That's a sure tail sign that you're not confident.
Mhm.
Oh, the other thing that I forgot to mention is work on a walk. Like people would,
Mhm.
yeah, work on a walk.
Like the way that you walk?
way that you walk.
Interesting.
I literally would work on my walk. Like have your head up, don't look at the floor, move your arms. That's really important because if you don't move your arms, that I can look at people and I can see who is and isn't confident by who moves. If they just have their arms straight down, that's a sure
Mhm.
tail sign of an overthinker.
Am I confident based on the way I walk?
Yeah.
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 Cool.
Yeah.
Any other advice for the peeps?
I had other things. Eye contact, that's
Mhm.
important. I always think 75% of the time you should be making eye contact.
Mhm.
But not all the time because that's creepy. So 75% of the time, stick with that.
Yeah, and a lot of communication is nonverbal. So
Mhm.
like if you want to be, we've talked about it on the podcast before, if you want to be successful, there are certain things. You should check out my episode of Blake. I think it's episode 8, 7, one of them. You should give that a listen because he talks all about communication and the best ways to communicate. Yeah. Anything else?
I think I covered most of them.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for being on the podcast,
Thank you for
Crissa.
having
Is there
me.
anything you want to like plug or tell the people about?
Yes. I'm gonna put in a shameless plug. Okay, so our podcast is not established yet. We want my friend and I, Charlotte Makovich. I
Mhm.
love her so much. I'm plugging that right now. Charlotte, if you're listening, I love you with everything in me. Okay, anyway. So we're gonna be starting our podcast hopefully in the next 6 months. We have to wait till we get to college so we can use our mics.
Mhm.
And we plan for it to be called What's the Point?
Mhm.
So look for that.
That's a great name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because I'll give a little, sorry, I'm a ranter. You learn that I talk a lot. But the reason why we call it that is because Charlotte, one thing that she'll always do is she'll look up answers for things, or she'll look things up knowing that she's not going to get an answer.
Okay.
Like she'll look up, like, does Chrissa hate me? Or like, is this weird? Like
I look up famous people's phone numbers and I never get an answer.
Oh, actually that's one thing I've been doing lately is I email famous people.
Really?
Yeah, just to ask them for advice.
Did they answer?
Not yet.
Okay.
One time I couldn't sleep, so I emailed Obama.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, but
Olivia
anyway.
Rodrigo, please answer me.
I emailed Bill Gates the other day.
I feel like Bill Gates would kind of answer though.
He might, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't heard back yet, but
He had a program once where if you didn't get a phone, I think it was 16 or 18, I couldn't remember. He would give you like $1,000 if you didn't have a phone. Yeah.
My cousins could have done that. They weren't allowed to have a phone until they were 18.
Yeah, he canceled the program. I don't know why. Maybe because he owns Microsoft. But anyway, yeah, so that was cool. But anything else? So What's the Point podcast?
Oh, yeah. But anyway, what I was getting with that is that she'll look up things, just random things, just knowing that she's not going to get an answer. And I just picture somebody just at a low point in their life, just looking up, what's the point?
Oh, that should be the graphic. Like in Google search, just what's the point?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Look for it.
Yep.
Look for it.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Wax on, wax off. This is the finale episode, so get ready for season 2 coming in, I think September, but we'll see. What's the point? Once they have links and stuff, the link will be in the bio. So this will be coming out in 2 weeks from now. So yeah, alrighty. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you guys for listening. Bye, everyone.